From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom on this, our Thanksgiving edition. And a happy Thanksgiving Day and a happy Thanksgiving weekend to you and your family from all of us here at Chicago Newsroom and from Can TV. On this particular program, a recap of hydraulic fracturing in Illinois. Fracking's been authorized by law, and a long, arduous process of setting down the rules and regulations has ended, and the regulations have been published. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's now possible for drillers and oil companies to apply for permits and to begin producing oil in Illinois using horizontal fracturing. Over the past couple of weeks, we had several guests on the show who represented both sides of the issue. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to watch some highlights from both of those shows so you can see for yourself the arguments for and against. Our first guests were from the Natural Resources Defense Council and Frack Free Illinois. These are the groups who fought very vigorously for the most stringent regulations possible, including accountability for the way that toxic wastewater is stored and for clearly defined public hearings, medical reports, and the like. So we begin with Dr. Laura Chamberlain from Frack Free Illinois.
I represent the frontline communities. We're working really closely with Shawnee Hills and Hollers and Shawnee Sentinels and SAFE and Illinois People's Action, the groups that are in Southern Illinois and Central Illinois that are going to be facing the dangers of fracking. And we had a different take on what was going on in...
We should point out, you're opposed, apparently, to
We are
fracking.
Absolutely opposed to fracking. We think there's no safe fracking. And we want to let people know that large groups like Sierra Club and even NRDC have said recently that there's no such thing as safe fracking. So there is a just enormous number of dangers to this extreme extraction, and we call it industrialized extreme extraction. People are, in Illinois, they're familiar with little mom and pop pumpers, dotting the countryside. Like, what's wrong with that? That's not what fracking is. Okay, fracking is deeper, farther, bigger.
Okay.
The scope is over.
I think it's important to try to do this just in little steps if we can, because I know that there are, probably everybody's heard the term fracking, but I'm not sure that many people really understand what the difference is between fracking and other industrial processes. And I think a lot of people have seen Gasland, so they've seen the guy lighting his faucet and other video like that. But is it possible for us to get a kind of an objective description of what horizontal fracturing is?
Yes, we have defined this. We have a bill in the General Assembly to change the definition of fracking from what's in the High Volume Fracking Act, Regulatory Act, to something that encompasses it all. Because what the bill that was signed in 2013 does is it separates out what's called high volume horizontal fracking, hydraulic fracking, from low to mid volume fracking. But and that's 300,000 gallons. You can kind of think 300,000 gallons, less than that, low to mid volume, above it, high volume. But what they have,
gallons of oil extracted?
There's a lot of different methods. They put down a lot of different chemicals.
But you say 300,000, what are you referring to?
Oh, yeah, what they put down. What they put down in the hole.
Oh, that's how much they put? Okay,
yeah, what they put in the hole.
Again, I'm sorry, I just feel the need to do this.
Okay.
Hydraulic fracturing, horizontal fracturing is a form of hydraulic fracturing, I believe. As I understand it, is drilling down and then injecting stuff into the earth sideways to sort of separate out the, no?
No. So
okay.
It's drilling down, and then the key piece here that came about at around 2000, 2001 is the drilling technology to drill horizontally.
Horizontally, right.
They're going right to source rock. The oil and natural gas, shale, is compressed dinosaurs, okay? Simplified. Compressed dinosaurs. And it exudes oil and natural gas, but there's small pockets.
Right.
So they're literally, because we are at the end of the carbon era, they are literally going right to the source, and they're trying to suck out the last drops of oil and natural gas.
And this is very, very far away. It's a mile down or something.
Illinois, you can think of Illinois as being tipped to the southeast. So it's going to be shallower in central Illinois, and it's going to go deeper in the southeast corner of Illinois. And so we're talking between 2,000 and 5,000, 6,000 feet. They will drill down, and then they can horizontally drill. They turn their drill bit, and they horizontally drill a mile. We know of 10-mile horizontal fracks in the Bakken. So it is
Bakken being North Dakota.
North Dakota. This is industrialized drilling. And then to get the chemicals that they need to release the oil and natural gas down into the ground, or to even melt the bedrock, they want to make fractures in the shale, okay? They do that a number of ways. They send down depleted uranium depth charges, and they make fractures. Then they send down, with high volume, they send down large amounts, millions of gallons of water, sand, chemicals, and they put it under very high pressure. This is another key element to fracking, is very high pressure, 14,000 PSIs, okay? And they shoot it down there and they fracture the rock. And then, with low and mid volume, they use very dangerous chemicals like hydrofluoric acid. Acidizing is one of the methods that they are using, and that literally melts the bedrock. So they shoot it under high pressure and they melt the bedrock. They have to create small fractures in the shale layer for the oil and natural gas to percolate up.
The point is that as I think you said, but just to reiterate, the days of going out, Jed Clampett going out in the backyard and shooting a gun in the ground and getting a gusher, those days are gone. So yeah, it's harder and harder to get it, and it's further and further away, and you got to do more and more industrialized processes to get at it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think there are a couple of things important to remember about the nature of fracking. First of all, it is a heavy industrial activity, as Dr. Chamberlain has pointed out, happening right in people's backyards, and I don't really mean that figuratively. Sometimes it is literally in people's backyards. So people are being subjected to proximity to what is a hazardous industrial operation. But you have to look at the particular hazards here. I mean, I would first of all point out that what Jed Clampett was doing was not entirely risk-free. So I think Dr. Chamberlain is absolutely right that we need to look at regulating a larger swath of these types of operations. But when we talk about high volume fracturing, it's particularly problematic simply given the volume of inputs and outputs. And just to give you a brief rundown of the kind of risks we're talking about, first of all, as Dr. Chamberlain mentioned, you're putting really large volumes of toxic chemicals into the ground. These have different purposes. Some of them are biocides to make sure that certain things don't grow, and et cetera, that kind of thing. They have various purposes, but many of them are toxic. And if you're putting, say, 4 million gallons of water in the ground, which is not an unusual volume to be using, you're going to be having hundreds of thousands of gallons of these chemicals going into that water, going into the ground. And then you're fracturing the ground, and you really can't be certain that water won't migrate. Now, the water issue has received a lot of attention, as it should, but I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that there are significant impacts on air quality from these facilities. You have, and it's disparate. You can have ponds that are emitting volatile organic compounds, which include carcinogenic ones. You have the various equipment. And just to give you a sense of what's going on in rural Wyoming, where there really is essentially no industrial activity except fracking, they have ozone bad days that are worse than what happens in downtown LA, and just as many people go to the hospital as you have in downtown LA on a bad air day. So this is something to be taken seriously. We're messing with both our air and our water, and with chemicals that may or may not be getting into our water supply.
And it's very, very significant. The workers' issues are over the top. There's serious, dangerous volatile organic compounds that are coming off of almost all of the equipment and from the well itself. Benzene, toluene, ethylene, xylene. These are carcinogenic volatile organic compounds. Hydrogen sulfide in a large enough amount can sicken people immediately. And the workers are really getting hit. It is 7 to 8 times more dangerous on the frack field than any other job in America right now.
Okay. Explain something to me that I've never quite understood. So you take this you've got this thing here.
Yep, go for it.
No, this is a very crude way to do this on television, but you're drilling down and then you're kind of drilling horizontally. I mean, it's a miraculous technology. You got to hand it to
It's
them.
very highly industrialized.
However they developed this, I don't know, but they're able to go this way. And in order to get these fractures to happen, they have to push in lots and lots of water, chemicals, everything else. Does that come back out again?
Yes, and it's very, very important. The flow, the waste stream is very toxic. In the shale layer, you can kind of think of the shale layer as the carbon filter of our planet. So all of the toxic heavy metals and radioactive particles have landed in the shale layer, and up they're coming with this waste stream. What happens is they dig down, and so there's mud and debris that is being brought up. That's all possibly radioactive and highly toxic. There's also flowback water that flashes back. If they put in 4 million gallons, under high pressure, some of it flashes back. It's called flowback in the first 7 to 10 days. That is highly toxic. But what gets really bad is that the rest of the water gets pumped out as they produce the oil or natural gas. It's called produced water.
So it comes up with the oil?
Yep, and they have to separate
and then they have to separate it out.
And that is really toxic and possibly radioactive.
And then they need to dispose of that water. And this really raises two issues. The first is that you're taking a really large volume of water out of the water cycle entirely.
Well,
it's not like watering a golf course where it goes right back to the groundwater. You're taking it out, you are injecting it into an underground well, and you're doing that in areas of the state that may be more prone to earthquakes. And this has already been an issue, the injection of these really large volumes of water.
Messing around with the geology.
Yeah, Oklahoma is having more small earthquakes than California is. But I think the bigger picture that you really need to keep in mind here is I'm quite certain that if you sat industry here at the table with us, they would come up with all kinds of reasons why the studies showing problems really, need to be done again because we don't understand exactly the mechanism by which, et cetera, this happens. And I look at that and I say, look, in our lives, we have inherently and appropriately an approach to risk that says if there's a significant risk that's being indicated by studies, what you don't do is go full steam ahead until you have so papered it over that there's no doubt. And in this situation, we have studies coming in, and I'm talking about peer-reviewed studies in well-known journals that are indicating things such as people living in proximity to fracking have a higher cancer risk, and their kids have birth defects at a very significantly higher rate. Now, we may not know exactly why that is. Is it because of what they're breathing? Is it because of what they're drinking? Is it because of the dirt they're playing in? We don't know that, but all I know is in my own life, I mean, as a pregnant mom, for instance, I only have to be told once that drinking and eating brie cheese is a risk. I don't really ask a whole lot more questions about, well, can you give me 5 studies about exactly why? I stop doing it until I know more, and I think Illinois ought to stop doing this until it knows more. We have plenty of data to know there's a risk.
We know a lot about this. That's actually, it is not unknown, okay? Like the earthquake risk. The independent seismologists, not the seismologists that work for the industry and will say whatever they're paid to say, not those, but the independent university-based seismologists, they've known about induced earthquakes from oil and natural gas exploration since the 1960s. There's whole papers written about this. And they are saying there is absolutely no question that the 100-fold increase in earthquakes across the mid-Atlantic basin, so Oklahoma, Ohio, Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, state after state, that is absolutely tied to the fracking. The fracking the drilling can cause earthquakes, the fracturing can cause earthquakes, and also the disposal of these millions of gallons of water under pressure in deep disposal wells causes earthquakes.
That's another whole issue, is that some of this water is just being injected permanently back into the ground. And of course, there's the huge issue about the aquifers from which we draw our drinking water. And I mean, that in itself is huge. There are so many things that I want to talk with you about, and we're really we have so little time to do this. Let me ask you one other quick question. the difference between oil and gas fracking. Illinois is looking for both. Is it going to try to extract oil and gas? And I ask this because one of the most amazing things I've seen in the whole fracking thing is that there's that satellite photograph of the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota, where that area at night is brighter than Manhattan on the map because they're just burning the gas because it's too cheap to process.
This is a real issue. There is potentially a huge amount of waste. In answer to your first question, no one knows for sure what they're going to find down there, but it is likely, I think the expectation is it will be oil, which will raise this issue from the North Dakota oil fields of what do you do with the gas. Now, one of the things we fought hard for in this
Wouldn't
legislation—
you just think that you would want to catch that gas and sell it?
Right now in Illinois, they are fracking with low to mid volume in central Illinois and in southern Illinois, and they are flaring the gas.
Which means just burning it, just burning it into the air.
Yep.
One of the things that we fought very hard for in the statute, and we still don't have anything close to a perfect solution, is a requirement that they capture their gas. And if they don't capture it, they're going to end up flaring it. But we think it's important that the first line presumption be that if you generate gas, you capture it, you use it, we don't waste that.
Yeah.
Except there's a huge exemption in the bill that says if they can't, it's not economically feasible, then they go ahead and
Meaning
burn it.
it's not economically feasible at the wellhead to capture it because what they would get for it isn't.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't
So they
make
need
it economically
pipelines,
feasible.
they need
Right.
gas
But
capture
the
technology.
world needs natural gas.
Absolutely.
So as you might imagine, the coalition that wants fracking to get moving sees things very differently. On our October 30th show, Mark Denzler of the Illinois Manufacturers Association explained why he thinks the process is safe. But we begin with my own confession that I'm personally not so sure about fracking. I count myself as a skeptic when it comes to this process. And the reason that I'm a skeptic is because I just imagine if we were doing this show in 1953 and we were talking with people who were talking about this miracle new DDT or PCBs. The PCBs are so miraculous that you could drink them. They're great lubricants. Everything works fine. And when you're finished with them, you can just dump them in the lake because they're completely inert. And then, of course, we find out otherwise. And this is one of those things that really strikes me as being like that our grandchildren will be sitting here at this table 40 years from now saying, what were they thinking? They injected all of this chemical into the ground. They polluted millions of gallons of water. They ruined the water table for all time. And they got a few years of oil out of the ground. What was the point?
Well, actually, that's a great segue, and I'm glad that you brought up the point of drinking, because Governor John Hickenlooper, who is a Democrat in Colorado and a geologist of all things, actually drinks glasses of frack fluid. He's done it in front of the press to show that most frack fluid now, the chemicals are food grade safe. And so, if you want to go
we'll
YouTube,
check in with him
you
in
can
20
find
years.
Governor Hickenlooper. But again, companies are using technology and it's improving on a daily basis. And there's certainly been some horror stories out there that largely have been proven false. For example, water lighting on fire was the famous scene in the movie. And the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission, their equivalent of the Department of Natural Resources, looked at it and found that it was geothermic methane. It had been the breakdown of organic materials, and people in that area had been lighting their water on fire for 100 years. I would note there's 3 towns in the United States called Burning Springs because their water is lit on fire, not because of hydraulic fracturing. So we think that there are safeguards in place. And I'd also note with the Illinois legislation that John Bradley was the chief sponsor, and he said at the beginning of every meeting, we want to make sure we protect the air, water, and land because he lives there, his family lives there. So that was always the guiding principle. And the other thing I think that you find historic about the Illinois law was the first time the environmental community supported the law. So folks like the Sierra Club and Natural Resource Defense Council, Illinois Environmental Council, Governor Quinn, Attorney General Madigan, all participated and they all signed off on the bill because it has the strongest environmental protections. And so we want to make sure from an industry standpoint that we are certainly protecting the air, water, and ground. There's a lot of protections in the bill that we think make sense for Illinois.
And by the way, that's the Tribune's Julie Werno, who was sitting in with us. She's not an activist or a fracking advocate. She's a reporter, and she's been covering the topic for months. So we asked her to help us with the questions, and Julie reported that many of the oil companies poised to set up shop here are having second thoughts because the new regulations are so onerous, or so they say. But we asked Mark Denzler if it wasn't really just that the price of oil's coming down because the market's so glutted, and so perhaps they just wanted to sit Illinois out and wait for the prices to go back up.
No, not at all. The folks in Illinois are looking at the law, which is the strictest in the country, bar none. They've looked at the rules that have been proposed by the Department of Natural Resources. They went far above and beyond what was intended in the statute or the negotiations. I'm happy to point out specifics. The oil companies have limited resources. They have limited capital investment in where to locate. So they make decisions every day. Do they come to Illinois? Do they come to Indiana, Texas, Oklahoma, you name it? They've looked at Illinois, and it's going to take a company 7 to 8 years just to recoup their investment. And when you talk about a well, many people don't think about it. They think, hey, it's, somebody goes in their backyard and drills for oil. No, and as Julie said, you're going down 6, 8, 10,000 feet. A well costs probably $6, 8, $10 million each. So it's going to take companies a long time to recover, and you don't just put it in one well. You're going to put it in a number of wells, and so companies make decisions, whether you're in the oil business or you're in manufacturing or you're in retail. They look at a number of decisions. Now, certainly the price of oil coming down could play a role, but that hasn't, that's just happened in the last week or two, well before these companies have started maybe looking elsewhere. When you had your program here a couple weeks ago, and the representative from NRDC toward the end made the comment, well, we not necessarily like fracking, but if we can make it so expensive so the companies don't come, that's what we're trying to do. And so, again, to your point, some of the things that they have pushed for in the rules that go beyond the statute are intentionally designed to try to stop the industry in Illinois. But sure, companies want to make a profit. Companies want to sell their product, whether you're a manufacturing company or you're agriculture. You look for customers around the world. But what it's done for the United States, if you look back in the last 5 years under the president's administration, all the job growth, almost 100% of it comes from the energy sector. The increased jobs, increased revenue. So what it's done to this country over the last 5 or 10 years has been significant. I mean, you look at North Dakota, I wish Illinois was that situation. They have $4 billion in reserves in the bank and the lowest unemployment rate in the country. I mean, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, it's a state with almost no population. It's not quite the same thing, is it?
Absolutely it is. I mean, they have an extremely low unemployment rate. Their McDonald's now are starting pay at $20 or $22 an hour
they
with
have
a
to
signing
fly
bonus.
people to work at Menards. They have to fly them in
we
on
sit here. I mean, we
helicopters,
sit here talking about minimum wage here. I'd love to increase the minimum wage because supply and demand, because you don't have enough workers to fill the jobs. I mean, we need jobs in the state of Illinois. We need revenue. This is a safe and proven technology. In the Illinois law, by far, is the strictest in the country.
And we'll give Mark Denzler the final word about horizontal hydraulic fracturing here in Illinois. Can you tell me and our listeners and Julie that you are sitting here today and you believe that horizontal fracturing is not harmful to the environment?
Yes, 100%.
100%, not even 99%.
You're always going to have issues no matter what industry you're in, whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, or in the oil business. Accidents do occur, no doubt about it. But when you look back at folks that have studied this, and so don't take my opinion, look at Lisa Jackson, who is the EPA administrator for President Obama, said this can be done safe. As we talked before the show, Dick Durbin was in his debate last night on WTTW. They were asked about fracturing. He said he's talked to the last 2 secretaries of energy, including Stephen Chu, who's a Nobel Prize winner, who said it can be done safely. So, folks like Dick Durbin and President Obama as Secretary of Energy and EPA are not necessarily always friendly to industry. And when they're out saying this can be done safely, it certainly can be done if the proper safeguards and protections are taken. And we've done that in Illinois. Julie talked, for example, about the closed loop system for water as opposed to using a pit. We agreed to that. We agreed to a historic provision in the law that nowhere else in the country, that if there is an incident in the state of Illinois, instead of making, for example, the landowner or the person that owns the well prove that the company caused the problem, it's automatically presumed that the company caused it unless they can prove otherwise.
Within 1,500 feet or
So the
something.
industry has taken the lead and said, look, we're going to be presumed guilty unless we can prove we're innocent. Where else do you find that?
So there you have it. Those were the arguments, pro and con. As we mentioned, the final step in this process was that the proposed rules, which had been amended after more than something like 30,000 public comments were logged, were to be finalized by the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and then published no later than Saturday, November 15th. And those rules were published last Friday. But at the same time, Julie Werno wrote a story in the Trib revealing that a number of opponents had filed suit to block the publication. And here's why. According to the NRDC and other organizations, at the very last minute and without any public participation, many of the safeguards the environmental community thought it had added to the regulations were just simply stripped away. And some of them were the very things we talked about right here on this show. The ability of drillers to flare off natural gas when they say it isn't economically feasible to capture it. The ability of individuals or groups who feel they're adversely affected by a fracking operation to demand a public hearing. These are all gone. Also, regulation of radioactivity contamination and a number of highly technical rules defining the degree to which drillers had to investigate the geography for possible faults before they started a project. So years of hearings and meetings and compromise and old-fashioned battling came down to one closed-door meeting of an obscure committee that decided in its wisdom to throw out a huge amount of that public-supported work. That's Illinois politics for you, I guess. So now we know permits will be issued and drilling could possibly start next summer. There may be some lawsuits, but that's the way it looks like it's going. So if you happen to get one of those supposedly thousands of oil-rich jobs, let us know before you head down south to seek your fortune. We'd love to talk to you. I'm Ken Davis, once more, from all of us here at the production and technical crews at Chicago Newsroom. Thanks a lot for watching. We're back next week with another show. And that show, by the way, is going to be very interesting because we have Jesus Chuy Garcia here for the whole half hour. Don't forget you can watch this edition anytime you want just by going to this address. And once again, happy Thanksgiving and a happy Thanksgiving weekend to all of you. Bye-bye.